So in this video, we will talk about loops, which are of two types, for loop and while loop in Python. And we will talk about some other statements related to the loops, like break statement, continue statement, range function, and in the end, we will talk about nested loops. The main difference between for loop and while loop is that we use while loop when we don't know in advance how many times we will be iterating the loop, and in for loop we, or at least the computer already knows how many times the loop will run. So that's the basic difference related to the usage of the loops. So let's see an example for while loop. So let's say we need to take input from a user, and unless user gives some specific input, we will keep on taking the input. So let's have a variable to take input from. Okay, so initially we don't have any value for this input, so for that we have a data type in Python called none. So if we assign none to any variable, it actually doesn't hold any data, it is just empty, right? So now we will write a while loop. So the syntax is something like this. We will write while and then we will write condition, right? So we want to run the loop unless name is not equal to let's say Abasi, right? And then a semicolon, and then we are inside the while loop. So if you note here, we are again inside the scope of while loop. So we need to have indentation of one tab, right? Like this. So now we will take input from user and we will store it in the variable name. So let's say we say name input and we will enter the prompt, or let's say enter your name, and then it will take input, and then right, so then the name will be stored in this variable, and then after taking the input, a loop will run again. It will come here, it will check this condition. So let's say I enter the name Usman. So Usman not equal to Abasi, so this will evaluate to true, right? So the loop will run again. So this loop will keep on running until this condition becomes false, right? And it will become false when I will enter the name equal to Abasi. So let's run it and see it working. Okay, so it is asking me for my name, and let's say I enter Usman, right? So now currently it is here. When I will enter Usman, it will store the name, the value Usman in this variable. Then it will iterate again, and it will check that Usman is not equal to Basi. So this condition is false. This condition is true, so it will run the loop again. Okay, see, it is asking for my name again. Let's say I give Usman 2 or Usman 3, anything, right? Now I'm going to give the input Abasi, which is compared in our condition, and now the program exited. So it means the condition became false, and the code came out of the loop, right? So this is a very basic example of while loop. Now we will see an example of for loop. So let's say we want to print numbers from 1 to 10. So in this case, we already know in advance how many times our loop will run. So this is a good use case to use for loop. So the syntax is very simple. So right. So before diving into the for loop, we need to get familiar with the function which is called range. So basically, what this function does is it takes two parameters. So or you can just give it one parameter. So let's say we call it with 10. So it will give us a range from 0 to 9, right? So this is mostly used in while using for loops. So let's say we want to print numbers from 1 to 10, right? So we will write for, and then we will write the variable which will hold the value of in each iteration, and then we will say in, like, how many times we want to iterate, and then we will use this function range, right? And then a column. So in the range function, we will give the parameter of how many times we want to run the loop. So let's say I pass it 10. So this will return me a sequence from 0 to 9. So the first value is by default 0. So let's say we call it 0, 10. So it means we are asking range function to give us the range from 0 10, but 10 is exclusive, so it will return 0 from 0 to 9, right? And then in each iteration, that value will be stored in this I variable. So let's say we print I here, and let's see what it prints. See, it has printed from 0 to up to 9. So this parameter is included in the range, and this is excluded, right? So this is a basic example of for loop when we want to run it for a fixed number of times. We can also use for loop to iterate the containers like arrays, in Python, list, tuples, or any other container. So, but we will see those examples when we will learn about list and tuples. So for now, we will be using range function. So yeah, so this is basically a simple example. So now let's say we want to print the sum of first 10 numbers, right? So we can have a variable here which will initially be 0. So then we inside loop we will do sum is equal to sum plus I. So how does it work? So when the loop will run initially, so we will have 0 in I, and then we will have 1, then we will have 2, 3 until we iterate the 10 number of times, right? So basically there is a one catch here, that we don't want to sum 0 to 9, right? It gives a 0 initially. We want the sum from 1 to 10. So we can change the first parameter. So instead of 0, we will give it 1. And as we discussed earlier, that this is exclusive. So if I want to run the loop up to 10, I will pass it 11 here. So because this is exclusive, so it will return me the range from 1 to 10. So now it will give me the sum of 1 to 10. So let's run it and see if it works. Okay, so we need to print the sum. Print sum. Okay, yeah, so it is 55. Let's see a shorter example. So it will sum from 1 to 4. It is 10. Let's confirm our results. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. And 4. So it is equal to 10, and it is equal to 10. It is printing 10. So it did what we expected it to do. So next we will see break and continue statements. Okay, so let's say we have a case where we want to, break the current iteration of the loop based on some condition. So there comes these two statements, break and continue. So let's see an example. So let's say we are taking the input from the user, and then we are printing the input here, right? So, but we have a special case here. So let's say if user has entered the name equal to, let's say, no name, right? So this is what user enters. So we don't want to print this value. We just want to continue iterating the loop without executing any further code inside this loop, right? So what we can do here is we will use continue statement. So this will tell the interpreter that we want to stop this current iteration and just move on to the next iteration, right? So any code after the continue statement will not run, but the loop will still run. The next iteration will still run. So let's see how it works. So let's say I run this, right? So it is asking me for my name. So let's say I enter Usman, and it has printed Usman because the name has the value Usman. It came here, it checked that is name equal to no name. No, this condition is false because name has the value Usman and Usman is not equal to no name. So this condition will evaluate to false, and this code will not run. So it will just print the name. So as long as we won't enter this value, this loop will continue running, and it will always run this statement. So let's enter Vasi. Okay. So now I will. Oh, it exited actually because we have this condition here, Vasi. So we will run it again. So Usman, it has printed it. So let's say we enter no name, right? So what will happen here is that name will contain the value no name, and here it will compare this to this, and no name equal to no name. Yes, it is true. So it will go inside the if condition, and here it will see a continue statement, and continue statement will tell the interpreter to just ignore anything after this line and just move on to the next iteration. So this should not print no name here. See, it won't print no name. So this is basically the usage of continuous statement. It won't like totally exit the loop. It will just stop that current iteration and move to the next iteration. So now we will see the use of break statement, which is kind of similar with one minor difference, which is actually very significant. So let's say we have another loop here, and whenever the user enters this value, we don't want to take any input from user anymore, right? We just want this loop to exit. Even this condition was not false. We just want to exit and finish the loop without running any further iterations. So that's the basic difference between break and continue. That continue, as its name tells, will continue iterating the next iterations, but break will not run any iteration. It will just exit the loop at the point the interpreter receives this statement. So let's run this code. So okay, so now if I enter Usman, it will print Usman. If I enter Usman 2, it will print Usman 2. And now if I enter no name, what will happen here is that if this condition will become true and break statement will run, and it will tell the interpreter to just exit the loop. So no further iterations will run, and no code after this line inside the scope of the loop will run. So here it is, right? So it just exited the loop and the flow came here. So whatever we are doing here will run next. So we can just say after loop. So Usman still in the loop, Usman still in the loop, no name, exit the loop and run the code whatever was outside the loop, which was this, right? So this is basically the difference between break and continuous statements. So now we will see some examples of nested loops. Okay, so let's say we want to print numbers from 1 to 5 like we did before. So that will be a very simple loop for I in range, let's say 4, and we will just print I here, right? So it will print numbers from 0 to 3 because 4 is not included and the default parameter is 0. So if we give 0 or no, it doesn't matter. Okay, so right, but we want to print this sequence like 0, 1, 2, 3. We want to print it, let's say 3 times. So what are our options, right? The first option can be that we can write this loop 3 times, right? So it will print this sequence 3 times. See 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, right? But what if we want to print it 10 times? Will we copy our code and paste it 10 times? So that doesn't sound like a good approach, right? So for that case, we will use nested loop. So nested loop is totally like a simple loop. So let's say we will have an outer loop here, and we know. So what we know is we want to run this code actually 3 times, right? So the outer loop will run 3 times. That's very simple, right? So we will just run the outer loop for j in range. We want to run it 3 times, so it will be 3, like 0, 1, 2, 3. And we want to intend it because it is inside the scope of the for loop. So yeah, so this is basically it. So now it will print the sequence 0, 1, 2, 3 3 times. Let's see the example output. So here it is 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 0, 1, 2, 3. So we will just go through the code again. So basically what it did was like we already have understood this code that this will print numbers from 0 to 3, right? And we want to run this code 3 times. So we will write this code inside the loop. Like we discussed, whatever code we want to repeat, we write it inside the loop. So now what condition this loop should have, or what should be the values here, right? So we know that we want to run it 3 times. So we called range function with 3 parameters. So it will give us, three the sequence of 3 numbers. So this is basically the outer loop. So the outer loop should run however times we want the inner code to run. So like in this case, we want the inner code to run 3 times. This loop will run 3 times. So initially this j will contain the value 0, it will come inside this loop and it will run the code inside this loop, right? So inside this loop we have another loop, right? So when you are here, forget about the outer loop, just consider that this is a simple loop. So what will it do? Like we saw before, it will print numbers from 0 to 3. So after it is done, this loop will exit like we saw before. So when it will exit, it will run the next line, which is actually another iteration of this loop. So now j will become 1, it will come inside the loop and it will run whatever code is inside the loop, which is another loop, yeah, right? So make just to understand that this variable here will get reset and it will get the new range, the new sequence of numbers from this range function in each iteration. So now I will again be 0. So it will again run 4 times, then it will exit, it will come here, j will become 2, and it will, keep on iterating until it runs 3 times. So this is how the for loop works. Maybe it will be it is sounding difficult to you, but if you practice with different scenarios and with different examples, you will get used to it. So this is it for now. See you in the next video.